better together, always by your side. We laugh together, sometimes we cry. We are better together, better together, always better together, better together. We are better together.
Welcome to the Better Together podcast, a space for stories, shared experiences, and real connection. Each episode, we explore the journeys of our community members, their growth, their challenges, and the power of peer support. We know that sharing personal experiences takes courage, and we're grateful to all our members who have opened up in this space. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Better Together podcast. I'm Laura, first and foremost a member of Better Together and the manager of Better Together. This podcast will be all about exploring unique stories, values, and the experiences that have helped to shape our community by the very unique people who are part of it. For our first episode, to give you a flavour, we're going to dive into the story of Better Together, how it started, how it's grown, and what it means to the people involved. So as we begin, I suppose I just want to share a little bit about what you can expect to hear in this first series. Each episode will have a different host, or two people really that will host each other through conversation. And that's intentional. It's a reflection of how Better Together is built around shared voices and collaborative experiences. So just like our community, this podcast isn't about one story or one perspective. It's the diversity of our journeys and how we all come together to support each other. Each episode will also be guided by a specific theme, and this is inspired by the things we do here at Better Together, from connection and joy to hope and belonging. And these themes very much mirror the values and the practices that shape our community, whether it's through peer support, our groups, our in-person events we call togethering, or other spaces of recovery and connection. So hopefully by the end of this series, you'll have not just a sense of the amazing stories of recovery within, but also a deeper understanding of what Better Together is and why it exists in the first place. So today, to start our first episode, I'm joined by Jim, who was part of starting it all a couple of years ago. Jim, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I'm Jim O'Dwyer. I am the development worker for the Southeast Regional Drug and Alcohol Taskforce as a job, which is important as it was part of the catalyst for starting Better Together. I have my own lived experience as well.
I think you should be on overtime for every time you have to introduce your title with the task force.
It's kind of more like I always say it sounds more like a Welsh railway station than it does kind of a title for an organisation. Yeah.
Do you want to just tell us, and for those listening a little bit, bring us right back to the start of Better Together?
Better Together started when the world was entering into the crisis of COVID. I remember at the time, a lot of the services everyone was kind of dashing. Nobody knew what was actually going to happen or the scale of what was going to happen. A lot of the substance misuse services went straight into kind of triage management. Let's take care of the most vulnerable first and move into that. So for me at that time, in my own experience, I was thinking, well, what about the people that are, what about everybody else? Where's the connection going to come? Where's the support going to come if all of a sudden we're all moved into emergency care and emergency situations? So I think that was my first inclination. We need to do something, and we need to have something for people to stay connected and to stay together in some ways. I had been working quite a lot. My own expertise, if you want to call it, is in collaborative and collaboration, and including and making sure that people with lived and living experience are included in decision making and policy and service development and things like that. So I come with quite a few years experience in doing that and working with loads of amazing people, whether it was the CE schemes that we have in Carlow and Kilkenny, and also the Recovery College. There was lots of people that were really engaged with lived and living experience and making sure that people were at the forefront and centre of decision making. So I had a network. So really what we did was we started first of all with, okay, what are we going to do? So we got a few people together and we said, okay, what's this going to look like? Yeah, I think Better Together evolved from, there was lots of stuff I knew from my own experience a bit in work and in life, which was, I knew that when people entered into treatment or support, stigma increased. That's not that the services were increasing stigma, but just that's a researched statistic. Stigma increases, this sense of guilt or shame increases because you're engaging in change in behaviour. So one of the things that was really important for me at the beginning was that one of the ways we respond to stigma is actually to make sure that first of all, you didn't identify by the challenge. The second one was that we would never ask you to leave. So it wasn't a behavioural management program in that way. And we could do that because we were online. But what we said to people was, we're not going to ask you to leave. You can leave yourself, but we're not going to reject you. And that was a really important thing to get across for me. And that was the difference, I think, that we brought into Better Together. Also as well that, and this is what we had to work at. This was an unlearning of ways of doing things, I think. But this is what we had to work really hard at, which was also, we said, look, we weren't going to judge whether, there wasn't going to be an issue whether you were using, not using, whether you were, it didn't matter. You come on to Better Together, we knew that people wanted to connect and wanted support and wanted to belong. And so that was some of the early premises. Mm-hmm. I also knew myself that another aspect that was key of Better Together was this process of self-reflection. When I looked at all of the evidence from different theories, whether it's cognitive behavioural therapy, dialectic behavioural therapy, there's all of this kind of inward reflection. It's also a deeply kind of a spiritual practice as well. It's this going inward to get to know your own movements and to get to know your own emotions, and then to move outwards there with connection and community. So that was also a key part. So it wasn't kind of come in and tell your story, but it was actually come in just today and check in. What's going on for you? How are you getting on? What supports do you have? All of these things were that inner, and to promote inner reflection. To be honest, I'd love to say, and I can say now that I can reflect now and say, actually, at the beginning, a lot of what we did was based on the experience, the evidence that was out there, me working with services, trying to implement those changes. And I suppose Better Together was the opportunity just to do that from square one. And so we did that. And every one of us kind of came together to do that. I think it wasn't we all brought that sense of ourselves, our own experience, our own knowledge, whether that was knowledge, lived experience knowledge or expertise. We all brought that into the mix, and we said, okay, what can we do? We started like that because it was co-learning. So we moved into this space very rapidly, like, I don't know, but let's find out. And we had a radical curiosity. I think that was the most amazing thing about it. You know, we weren't trying to make it like something that was there before, even though we're impacted by that experience. But it was a real opportunity to say, look, we don't know. Because in actual fact, the world itself was in an I don't know. And so this gave us an opportunity maybe to recreate, to relook, to ask questions at a deeper level that we probably wouldn't have gotten a chance to do if we were just trying to start from scratch, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's funny when I was thinking about on the way down, you know, what we're always trying to really define for ourselves, or that internal experience of Better Together and what makes it so unique. And it's funny how really it started with that I don't know. And I think jumping on that opportunity where, like you said, the world globally was in a crisis. And I love that kind of mirroring of actually, we were all in the I don't know, but how that can be a positive at times. And it's the unlearning and the relearning and the new learning. And you mentioned stigma too. And I think that's something that throughout the years has remained the same, where often, and it was my own experience too, maybe, that any previous supports, they might have been useful for me in different ways, but it was always this kind of mirroring of what you had done, who you had been, labels put on you. And I think for me, I suppose it was about walking into Better Together and having a mirror I could define for myself, or who I could be. What was it like for you in those early days?
I love what you just said, though. I think this mirror, I think in the early days of Better Together, I suppose one of the things for me was, especially in relation to stigma, was that if all we see in somebody is what's happened or what we call maybe what's wrong, if that's all we see, then it's like looking, it's almost trying to see somebody through a blindfold. We don't see them fully, we don't understand them fully, and we judge everything by a small amount. So it's almost like the person is right up to our nose in some way. And I think for me, it was my own experience of help and support came from people that people might say probably messy, mad, and I don't mean that in a disparaging way, you know. But actually, these are the people for me that in their humanity, in their beauty, in their realness, in their openness, in their willingness just to listen, to be with, and to offer love and support. These people were, saved my life. It's really important that we don't just see what's wrong in someone, that we see the dignity in which the person actually has. And that's the starting point. Starting point isn't what's happened or what's wrong. They're really important parts, but the part is actually being able to dream with each other, maybe be able to see a little bit further with each other. And that's an unknown as well. And we need each other to experience that. We need to be each other's mirror. And I think it's a really challenging call. Can I sit with somebody? Can I journey with someone enough that we're mirroring, and that the bits that we see in each other or don't like in each other are probably just elements of things that need to be transformed in the reflection of each other. And I think that's what's so, I use this word a lot, beautiful about Better Together, is that it provides that space for that, I think.
Yeah, and I think one of the best things I did for myself was actually to accept that I needed people. But that was a really good thing. I think we can be in this age of self-care, self-love, kind of hyper-individualism. And it really takes us away from community. And realising that when I stepped into Better Together, it was a mirror held up, and I needed to see those pieces of myself, because it's something you said then. I got this image of, it's often like looking through a dirty window and trying to see yourself, and other forms of support. It was like a sentencing. It was support, but it was support based on what you were. And this kind of everything had to be in service of trying not to go back there, and constantly moving away from being, God, I felt like this dirty, shameful addict. My whole life now is just going to be about running away from that all the time and repenting for that. And so rather than the sentencing, we use this word, I think, a lot Better Together as an invitation. It's an invitation to explore, and that can be what happened to you, but you also don't have to define through that, or you don't earn your place by what you've been through either. I think that's something that's unique.
It's really profound. So what was that like for you then, to kind of to own that?
It's shaped my life. I think it shaped my relationships, shaped my sense of self, or gave me the opportunity to shape my own. Not that it did it for me, but it was also not to say that it was uncomfortable at times, because it was new and it was different. And I find I have to remind myself when people are first joining, that choice, and we talk about choice a lot and being trauma informed, but choice can be really overwhelming when you've maybe not had it before, or like that you walk into a support and you're passively told what you need to do and how you need to do it, which kind of says that you don't know yourself. And we've talked about this before. I remember being very new on, and you just asking me, what do you think? What would you do? What do you reckon here? And it was kind of like, I felt like I'd been screaming and shouting for someone to ask me what I thought for a long time, but to be asked very much through me then, I kind of thought, well, I don't know what I think. But I got very comfortable in that too. So I think it was a long time of kind of stepping into that place bit by bit. But maybe that's it too. It was a bit like a home to go into and be comfortable. Everything else, I felt like I was stepping further away from myself all the time.
I love that image of a step and stepping into something. It's like that call of a sense of space and a place, and but you have to have a movement towards it, don't you? And I think that's the thing for me, that's about how we create that space for each other. And I think it starts first of all with being able to see a person as they really are, and to be curious about what that is, like that, and creating space for that journey to happen together, I think and it is challenging, isn't it? I found that at the beginning I was unlearning more than I was actually providing. I think I was being challenged more in that space internally myself, more than I was probably, or I thought I was offering support. But it was fundamental to actually deepening connection, seeing more the potential in people, being able to trust more in the unknown because of what was happening. Like we were in this unknown, we were shaping the groups based on what we had, and people were turning up, and they weren't just turning up, they were staying, and they weren't just staying, they wanted to contribute, and we'd people logging on from New Zealand. We had people from the UK. We had all of this was kind of going on, and the numbers were getting bigger. I think within the first week we had really large numbers, and so there was this element of all the time self-reflecting on, because I think the system can at sometimes. I realise for myself that I have become a lot more risk averse in the system, unintentionally. And that's not that, and I don't mean that as a control thing, that's a safety thing, that almost like I'd been trained in some ways to be too safe. Mm-hmm. And so some of those safety things in me were challenged quite a lot through being with people and understanding. And I think what was fundamental for me was getting the feedback, actually being able to say to people, how do you think I handle that? And for people to be honest with me and say, I don't think I handle that really that well, and for me that was just to have that space to be able to also learn and grow, to also be challenged. So we weren't mimicking anything. And one of the things for myself, I remember this from my own experience. Sometimes we get asked questions, what we call in assessments. Some of them are tough questions. And they're things that you're trying most of the time not to think about.
Yeah.
And you give a lot of your time trying to move away from that. Mm-hmm. And I say move away because it's kind of like I don't want that near me. So you get asked questions like that. And even though people spend a good bit of time trying to develop a relationship, it's still a big question to ask. So I think for me it was really important when I thought about the dignity of that. I kind of thought we shouldn't really ask questions that we're not willing to answer for ourselves. How would it feel for me if I had to answer that? And this was my understanding of the impact of trauma and adversity and toxic stress as well, which is kind of, and that doesn't mean we don't have to ask questions to get support and help. I'm not saying that for once, but there was definitely, in terms of Better Together and the facilitation of the groups, not to sit in this place of I'm a facilitator, so I have more knowledge, more power, more experience. Yeah. But actually, no, I have a life going on, and the questions I ask you, I'm going to answer for myself today. And it's not this psychoanalytic or this a counselling perspective of transference and countertransference. It's not this. It's not this element of a blending relationship that's damaging for the person, because it's not therapy. But it was something that was key to building trust and building understanding too as well. So, like on the check-in question, how do I arrive today? It's okay for me to answer that question as a person. Mm-hmm. Why should I get the positionality to ask somebody, what's going on for you today? How are you arriving today? And not answer that for myself. And I think that created on Better Together this space where it was actually okay, where people were learning from each other, where it was this element of, okay, yeah, I hear that. And even just to normalise some things. And I remember people at the beginning kind of saying, oh, it's great to hear people that have trained or professionals saying, that today is difficult for them, or I have this challenge going on. But at the same time, it was done within a self-reflective element. It was done like, this is what's going on for me and this is what I'd like to do. So it wasn't kind of a splurging of things, but it was a real deep reflective insight and a sharing of that insight, I think. And that was both new for lots of us, and uncomfortable for some of us based on our perspective and our training and our lived experience. But I think it was way more rewarding than people would maybe even realise.
And it's even talking about that mirroring again of often you hear in recovery circles this life beyond your wildest dreams, and I used to think this is far from it, I've never was more miserable than when I got clean, and I thought something's amiss here. But to see people living in ways that finally I thought, I wouldn't mind a bit of that, but they didn't feel miles from me, or someone who I consider to be very quite a connected or well person, but to have a bad day and that be okay. So to come out of this kind of catastrophizing of way of living and bridging that gap, I suppose, between you and I, whoever that you and I is,
I think for me there was moments of that. I remember a lot of people coming on, introducing themselves via their whatever the challenge or diagnosis was.
Yeah.
And I remember that at the beginning, thinking for myself, I was kind of thinking, okay, I know you have. You've told me that you experience borderline personality disorder, or that you're on an opioid substitution program, that you've I was thinking, I don't know anything else about you. You know, and it tells me very little about you. And that's not to minimize that experience or that, but it doesn't tell me everything. And I think this was the element for ourselves of maybe just allowing people just a space where they don't have to identify as something other than they want to, obviously. And I think that was pretty profound, because I could feel that in myself, and I could feel that in others when they came on, just that kind of breath out. I remember asking curious questions like what does that mean? Just, this common understanding, like what's that mean? What's that like? What does that mean? Borderline, but I don't understand. Can you tell me? Can you inform me? Can we get to know what that means in everyday life? And that's why the check-in and reflection was so important, because aside from all of those things, we have to get on with life. We have to get on in relationship. We have to get on in our world, and that means that we have to work this stuff out. And I was thinking, for myself, I wasn't very sporty growing up, you know. But the one thing I had to learn to become an Olympian at was wrestling with myself. And that wrestling, that always kind of looking and this unrest in myself, at some point I just had to stop wrestling with that and just let it be. You know, that constant restlessness that could be intense in different ways at different times. Like it could be overwork, it could be anxiety, you know, people call it mania, it could be all of these things that we talk. But for me, it was just layers of intensity. And I'm not saying that that's the way it is for everybody, so I'm just giving my own experience of that. And I think so learning to wrestle, to let that rest, for me was kind of, and I could do that in Better Together. Even for myself, it could rest for a while. Just that space, that pause between that experience and something new and something different, and being able to trust people in that. That I had, that there was unconditional support, there was genuine love. Like it wasn't like a hotel receptionist, hi, happy to see you. It was people that were genuinely happy to see you. People that were willing to be vulnerable and willing to share learning and co-learn and be in that space with each other. And I think it's so hard to express to people what that type of support is actually really like, without trying to put a name on it. Oh, that's peer support, or oh, this is. But to kind of quantify that experience, to be able to say exactly and what brought it about is a challenge. But for me, it's a reality. Like it's a deep reality. And I think what everybody brought to Better Together was just amazing.
I think that's always been one of our biggest challenges or wants, is because it's so special to us, I suppose, is to try and capture somehow the experience of it. But maybe that also talks to the value of lived experience and why we do things the way we do, is because it's so much more than you could ever capture or you could ever read, and you kind of have to be within it to feel it and to notice it. But that's hard to grasp for a lot of us, and I think, you know, we've always been seen as quite different in the earlier days, or just to continue getting it off the ground and trying to solidify this thing that isn't solid, you know. What was that like, or what were those challenges?
I think for myself, it was almost like an evangelical going. There was an element of, you know, go spread the good news about Better Together, you know, and that's kind of tough. So there was challenges, but they weren't blockers. I think that's really important to get across. Like, and I remember saying to Paul Goff, the general manager in social inclusion at the time, and Paul said, "Yeah, look, go for it." And even without that, yeah, go for it, we didn't have blocks at all. And we were very, very lucky that way. Like, we had good support. I mean, we got, in the initial stages, we had 2 counsellors and a drug education officer from the HSE, from the substance misuse team. And they were fantastic. They did amazing. People loved them. They were great. And I think it was that kind of willingness to kind of say, yeah, and then probably correct caution in between. You know, you know, to kind of say, okay, where's this going? How's this going? And time to reflect in that and what it actually meant. And then we had, so that was always there. But there was also, what we were doing was so different. And it was so different even in dialogue. Like, we weren't using the same language, dual diagnosis, yet everyone on Better Together, you know, we had a high portion of people that may, if they were engaging in services, would be given that type of quantifier, yeah. And so we were doing that, and we were kind of saying it wasn't translating exactly what people maybe perceived working with dual diagnosis would be actually like. You know? We were engaging with people who were actively using, people who were abstinent, all of this. This stuff was I don't mean to say it, but this stuff was radical.
Yeah.
This stuff was radical.
Yeah.
This was kind of like, how was that happening? And we had a community of people who were wrestling in that and sitting with it. So I think the biggest challenges that we had going forward was articulating from what people knew about what support was, from what people knew about what even some challenges were, and how to handle those, versus what was happening on Better Together and what we were learning through doing and how we were starting to find a common language around different things like intentional peer support. All of these things people were saying had a common language around this stuff. So the challenges were, and then we had to, I suppose there was an element of just having to stand the ground for Better Together. To say, look, no, we're not just different for the sake of difference.
Yeah.
You know, we're not just trying to be different. This is something that's evolving from people bringing their experience and bringing their own lived and learned experience. This is what's happening. And I think that was what we had to stand for at the beginning. And I think any of the challenges that we overcame were challenges of unlearning and relearning. And I think what we've seen is that people have gone with that, you know, and people have said, yeah, okay, look, this is, and it's just a time for kind of acceptance on it. But at the beginning, some of those conversations in those stretches and those experiences kind of felt a bit like you were kind of fighting for.
Yeah.
But what really, the only struggle was really understanding, trying to form from what had been to what was happening, if that makes sense. And so for you then.
Because then I came along and of course, you know.
Yeah. But that was then. And we were able to secure funding. We were able to we had the research.
And for listeners, I suppose, because we live and breathe this every day, you kind of forget this is not someone's entire life and people don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're talking about an evolution then of 5 years almost. So it'll be 5 years since March 2020 of COVID. How has it evolved over time? Where are we now?
I think it's really important for me to kind of, because when I think about 5 years, I think about that's, I suppose, just to ground people maybe who aren't aware of what Better Together does. That was 5 years, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, a minimum of 2 groups a day, all voluntary. 5 years of building that type of support. I mean, you're talking over 25,000 hours worth of support that was given out of the connection that people felt and had. And people kept saying to us, you can't keep that up. But it did. And I think for me it's really important, because I'm always struck with that. I'm always just struck with just how kind, how compassionate, how willing people were to come on to receive support. And I think this is the important thing for me with Better Together. We're not passive recipients of care. We are active participants in it. We're creating the very thing that we're receiving from the beginning. From the beginning. So you don't come in passively receiving a support on Better Together. You're not coming in with that with the hand out. Your arms are stretched out because you're coming into something like you said earlier. But you're not a passive recipient of that. You're actually creating that when you come in by your hello, by turning up at the group, by offering who you are, by being a member of a community. That's what you're doing. So I think that's really, really, really important.
And inherently seeing when you come on from day one that by showing up here, not only, and it's good to take up space, so not only are you taking up space for yourself, but by showing up here, because if no one did, the group wouldn't be on, it wouldn't exist. But you're creating space for others to be witnessed, to be heard within that. And I think it's good to touch on, I mean, even when we got that research, to see those numbers, because we can be so in the doing of it, you forget that this is not typical. This is not 7 days a week, twice a day bare minimum, and we're increasing all the time. And ran on the goodness of people. But also not the give back, I think is so important to say too, that it's not about, well, this has been done for me, so I need to give it back. And it's almost this kind of exchange of guilt and making up for something.
Yeah. I think that for me was something that was very clear. I suppose for myself, I wanted to try and bring out of myself in some ways, which was you don't have to give back.
Yeah.
That's not reciprocation.
Yeah.
And you don't owe anybody anything. You know, I remember listening to when we were in Lisbon. I remember listening to a guy outside a shop saying, "Love and water should be free." And when he said that, I thought, yeah, but we also pay a price.
Mm-hmm.
And the price we pay is each other. We give each other to that. Love doesn't happen it doesn't arrive on you. You have to give. And I think it's understanding that you don't have to give back. It's not owed. It's experienced. Your dignity is there. If you're feeling love and receiving love, we love because we have received it. It's not deficit based.
Yeah.
It's not deficit based. Love isn't deficit based. And I think this is the real, and we love because we have been loved. And that's what changes things. If I've received support and care, I do that because I have received it, not because I have been granted it. You know, I've been given freely, and freely then I do the same. That for me is this fundamental aspect of Better Together, that it's not owed, it's experienced and it's shared and it's reciprocated, and then it's given out. And that goes back to the stigma, the guilt and the shame. And it's okay to have remorse, and it's okay to kind of look back and say, God, I wish I made better choices. You know, I'd love if I can look back now and say, I really wish I had the awareness to make better decisions or just make better choices. If I'd have moved here, if I'd have said this, if I'd have done these things. But these are better choices. And to reflect on that. And I think that's the depth that comes with that, is to say, yeah, look, that's where we are. But the love you received wasn't based on what you did. The love you received on Better Together is because we're all loved like that.
It's to be free to freely give back. And love, I think, is so healing. And I was really stretched in what love is and can be. And it doesn't have to be. There's so many different forms. But realising that, I remember you said to me before, and one of our many conversations, and for listeners, every phone call we have pretty much is like this. But you were loved into wellness, which was probably one of the most striking things you said. And actually it really hit me, because I realised I'm alive today because people gave me time, and that's how people loved me. They didn't fix me. They didn't have the answers, but they gave me time. And through that I realised I was loved equally into wellness. And I think that's what we do on Better Together.
It's a great gift to know that if someone ever said to me, Jim, what's your testimony? That is my testimony. Very simple. I was loved into wellness, and loved also into being somebody who came from that experience, that lived experience.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing, because sometimes support and services kind of like it. We're always interested in what happened, and I think that's one of the biggest things for me that's changed over. Like, what is my experience? My experience now is, despite everything that happened to me in my life, I was loved into wellness. I had received kindness, care, support. I had received all of those things. And I think that for me is a much more accurate depiction of my life now. You know, that I could, if you wanted to ask, I could go into all of that. Why? But the reality of it is, what's worth knowing more is that I was loved into wellness. And I think that's the element of coming back into Better Together and what we create. And I think that's I think that's what people don't get about peer and lived experience. I think they just don't get that, because it's very hard to quantify that. It's very hard to put a love brief intervention.
Yeah. How do you make sure that box is ticked?
Yeah, because like you said, Laura, and I think what you said is really, really profound. That takes time. That resource is time. Yeah. And if Better Together is anything, it's an example of the resource of love given in time over. And that's, so people being on a chat group, people being available on our togotherings, all of those things. That's the resource of love.
Yeah.
Time.
And I think that accurately captures it. Of, I don't give back now as much as so much was given to me, but because I have it freely now to give. People gave me time, and so now I have it, and I can occupy spaces with people. I'm not giving it back, but it's just there.
What's it like for you now? Because you came on to Better Together. You were rocking. You were rocking on what you brought in, all the different groups that you brought in, your experience that you brought in, that sense of perspective, and then you were successful then at the for the role of manager coordinator. So what's that been like for you?
What has that been like for me? It's been surprising. It's almost been reflective of beginning with Better Together, where I had to unlearn again. In some ways, I think I feel more supported and loved now within this role than I did when I was solely a member. And I think that's more because I had to open more in myself. I had to kind of expand my arms more and take in more. But I also had to let go a little bit of Better Together. I had kind of left other forms of support, and it became my mainstay, and I had to kind of allow that movement out where I was no longer a member facilitator, and there is that piece where I'm in a different space now, and sometimes I have to occupy a different side of the table. So that was hard at times too, to kind of start to let that go. And it's the doubt comes in too. You know, I have moments where I feel, and this is a reflection of my own internal experience, not of Better Together, but like a child that's been put in charge of their own crash, you know, where I wonder, and I kind of think, is this a good thing or not, you know? And I wonder, you know, would a child recognise that maybe it's more than they need to take on? But the biggest thing I think was, to do this, I really, really had to lean in to trust. And I remember for a long time, and it actually came to me on one of our retreats, where what we were doing and what I had planned was quite challenging. And I had this kind of panic, and I thought, oh God, how's this going to go? And in my head, I was thinking, people just, hopefully they'll trust me and they'll trust the process. And that night I was thinking on it and worrying for the rest of the weekend. And then I thought, oh no, I have to trust people. I have to trust them to come around and that everyone will be okay. So it was stepping into a manager role without managing, you know, because equally I was taught by the system to manage myself and to fix, and that I'm something to be fixed. So I have to make sure that I never put that on someone, what was put onto me. That's the most important thing to me. So to step into a role without ever stepping into managing people and managing their symptoms and managing how they want to be.
You said something that I thought was just such a beautiful statement. Your role now means that your arms have to get wider because more people are coming in, and that you have to expand more, and not manage. And I think probably given every book on transformational leadership that was ever written in that sentence, in that ability to understand that trust is reciprocal, but also that you have to open up more and be more kind of aware, vulnerable, leaning in, rather than actually trying to sort things out and manage things, you know. I think that's the essence, though, of real leadership. And I think they're two different words for a reason. And so the creativity that happens on Better Together is pretty immense, isn't it? What's that like for you, to be in a creative hub as well?
It's exciting, and it's hard, just as co-production is. You know, it takes patience, it takes time, it takes trying something, seeing will it work or not. This podcast no doubt will be the same thing, you know. I didn't even want to give too much on our plan, because no doubt it'll change by the next time. For me, it's changed actually how I see and think about the world and how I process, because creativity is not just about what you do, but it's how you think, it's how you see, it's how you understand other people. I think I've always thought in metaphor, maybe a bit abstract, and anecdotes, and that kind of served to jumble me up in my head, whereas I kind of found a place where that works for me in Better Together, and it feels like it's something worthwhile. But it has become our norm now, and I find the more we're comfortable in that, people, new members or anyone who gets involved, it's safe to come into that place. It's safe to come into an unknown. It's safe to, everyone is kind of mirroring that for each other now. And maybe that's coming back to where we started, which is, okay, everyone's involved here. Everyone's part of the conversation. You know, we're always asking who's at the table and who's not. So I think maybe that's part of creativity, is also super healing in that way. And it's saying, okay, what do I think? You know, and getting used to asking that question for yourself. And I think that's what real creativity is.
It's transformational creativity, isn't it? For me, Better Together felt like I was constantly in that song on Willy Wonka's Chocolate Factory, you know, the imagination. So this innovation pot is always on the boil, I think. And it's just waiting for somebody to kind of say, this is what this is, or can we?
Could we try this?
Yeah, could we try this? And I think that openness in Better Together for me has been profound, because there was never, we didn't close anything down. Everything was always, can we? Can we have a look? Can we test? Can we try? Does it work? Does it not? And there was never a bad idea. It was, and the willingness to kind of just accept that and kind of go with it and say, look, let's test. And I was kind of thinking, sometimes we don't get the opportunity to do that in real life at all, because down comes everything, you know. And I was thinking about this morning, actually. The things that are consistent and better together, the check-in and the reflection, but everything else it moves and it shifts. So even thinking about how we do what we do, even in services. Yes, you can have your mainstay of a service, but you can also allow room for innovation and creativity and a bit of fluidity. I think for me, one of the things I suppose I'd really like to invite people into is conversations are like this all the time and better together between anybody and between everybody. And the invitation of the podcast is to kind of hear the things that are actually spoken about when you're trying to sort through life, when you're trying to grow, when you're trying to stretch. And I think is the same invitation I think we offer everyone in Better Together. Come in, you're welcome. We're delighted for you to come in. We're delighted to learn and grow and share. And that's including for the listeners. You know, we want to know, we want to learn and grow, but also take part in what's going on. Find yourself through others. Find yourself with others. I think that's the invitation always at Better Together. You know.
And I think to know it's never lip service, because no one is the same shape as you. No one can be replicated. So I don't need to be like you or you like me, but we need everyone and what they bring. So for anyone listening, know that you would genuinely be welcome, and what you would bring would be important and is integral. And every day we grow and we plant new seeds. You know, people might look up our website and see the logo as a tree with hands, and it's every day we're growing. We're a forest, we're trees. We love our anecdotes. And there's a place for you to come and ground into. And
unlearn. Take a pause. You know, dare to see something about ourselves that we didn't realise because we haven't had that mirror of the other. And that feedback comes, that we talk to each other, we experience each other. There's a freedom to give that. That's a beautiful thing, I think.
And come into a place where you can share your struggles. You can be in whatever. We'll meet you wherever you're at.
Yeah.
And whatever that place looks like. But in the middle of being within that kind of supportive space, you'll hear joy too, and you'll hear lightness, and you'll hear celebration. And it's not always dark, and people truly do care for each other.
Better Together would not be what it is without the individuals that come in and make it what it is. So I think if you've been looking for a space, if you've been wondering about what it is, come in and explore. If it's not for you, that's fine. Don't worry, you know. But
exactly.
but you have a space. Nobody that's ever gone away and came back ever said, you know, oh, I have to realign with the group, I have to get myself back. No, it's always like, oh, well, how are things? Like it is with friends. You know, when you have deep friends, it doesn't matter whether you've seen them for 10 years or 2 years or 2 weeks. It's always the same thing. I think that's the way it is for me with Better Together.
I suppose to close, I think this is a good opportunity, Jim, to say, and I think I don't like to speak for others too often, but I think I can on this occasion, to say thank you. And I think thank you. You started this podcast and you started the conversation around saying, but what about people? And so I think to say thank you for always coming from a place of saying, what about people? And I know in the background fighting for a very long time, long before Better Together, always asking that question of who's at the table? Who do we need to be at the table? And what about people? And coming from that place of love and true appreciation. And mirroring that for us too. My life, I know, is fundamentally different because of Better Together. And I think a lot of people would say the same. So from all of us, I would say thank you for what you did and what you continue to do.
Well, that's a bit, and thank you for saying thank you. But even at that, I think about just the reciprocal nature of that I'm deeply changed because of all of you. I'll always be deeply grateful for just the beauty of people and what they gave and how we built this thing from that.
That's it for this episode of the Better Together podcast. Thank you for listening and for being part of this conversation. If something resonated with you today, we'd love for you to keep the conversation going. We invite you to visit the feedback section of our website, where we'd love to hear your comments, your questions, or your ideas for future episodes. You can find out more about us by visiting better-together.ie. You're welcome to join us too, or follow us on Instagram and Facebook at bettertogether.support. If you or someone you know needs support, please reach out to the Samaritans on free phone 116 123 or text hello to 50808. Recovery is possible. We are always better together. We'll see you next time.
better together, always by your side. We laugh together, sometimes we cry. We are better together, better together, always better together, better together.